Hey y'all, it's fall, and you know what that means. It's event season. And unfortunately, because we are still in a pandemic, everything all is virtual now. So we're going to talk all things virtual events, do's and don'ts, because Doug and I not only have done a few, we've hosted a few, and we're here to share with you, our best practices and tips and tricks. But before we get started, let's get this intro video going. Good morning, Wednesday, October 7th. It is a beautiful and brisk fall day. And Doug, how are you?
I am doing awesome. Yourself? Welcome to Q4.
Welcome to Q4, everybody. It's been, I was on the road this week again, been back traveling actually quite a bit since May. And, I know that's not the norm now, but what we are seeing for people to get out in front of people, and I'd be remiss to say that this is when typically we would be having the largest gathering in business aviation, NBAA-based 2020, which would have been in Orlando. Tier is not happening this year. But in lieu of that, I don't think that's kept people from trying to find ways to connect with people. We've talked about this throughout the duration of our show, and probably why we're doing this is, let's create a virtual event. So I know that I've hosted several across the board. You have done so yourself, Doug. I wanted to share with people kind of our do's and don'ts, kind of like the 3 P's we talked about: promotion, preparation, and presentation. Just because we've seen a lot of really good things and probably some things that people can improve upon. And before you kind of dive off into the deep end, I wanted to make sure that we helped you guys be as prepared as possible.
I am excited for this because so many times I see like every week people are like, oh, let's do this new Zoom thing, or let's do this person. You're like, if you don't do it right, people will tune out just because they're exhausted from being in front of a computer screen. So right from the get-go, the first interaction of promoting your event's going to be clutch. But as soon as you brought this up this morning, I was like, this is going to be a good one.
For sure. So let's just jump right into it. Let's talk about the promotion of an event, because there's a funny saying, and I think it goes with everything you do online. I mean, so if a tree falls in the forest or it falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? So again, you're hosting an event or you're doing something online. If nobody's there to know that event's happening, doesn't even matter. I don't know. What have you seen, Doug? What would you tell people as far as it comes to promoting events, like what they should do, how far in advance? What's your take on that?
The irony of that question, you see a lot of people fail when it comes to marketing their participation in a trade show. They don't do any pre-show marketing, and then they're like, wow, that trade show didn't work. That's because no one knew that you were there. So you have to let people know that the event's coming. And one of the things that I've noticed that has helped the success of both major events that we've run is making sure that you leverage the speakers and their notoriety to get people to pay attention. And if you can get their support to help promote it, it's even bigger. But doing simple things like creating little cards that say, hey, this person's speaking, here's what they're talking about. And just making sure you use every vehicle at your disposal to get it out there. So use your email list, use your social channels, tag the speakers, tag like anyone else, and just make sure that you have the right content to promote it.
Yeah.
And obviously, the bigger names you have, the more people that you're going to attract. Now, the one caveat I will say, it's really important to make sure that you're promoting people relevant to the goals of what you're trying to accomplish. Like getting a big name for the sake of a big name that doesn't align with your audience is the same thing like, giving away an iPhone watch at your trade show booth. Unless you're Apple, you're not really promoting the products and services you have. So there's a delicate balance there, but having a really specific promotion strategy is going to be key to getting the right people to sign up. And then making sure you have the structure to collect their information, like having the landing pages up well in advance, having the registration process really clean, really simple. One of the biggest challenges we had when we did the virtual agency expo, we actually started to send traffic directly to a registration page as opposed to a landing page.
Mm-hmm.
They knew what it was from the ad content that we changed, so just getting them quickly to register was way easier than going through a whole long drawn out process.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, again, without getting too technical, when you mentioned earlier again just about like the promotion, I think communication. Unfortunately, because we are spending so much time online, I mean, we already were prior to COVID, but even more so now, there's just so much noise online that is just constantly bombarding us that you have to overly communicate your message, the value prop, and that's part of the promotion. You just have to constantly keep letting people know, hey, this is coming up, we've got this going on, and that's where you vary the message. You know, maybe you're varying between speakers and what the value prop is, and maybe you're mixing in both. That's where it becomes so essential to constantly create new content, find different ways, and if you're being smart about it, if this is a really big event for you, if you're being smart about it, you start to, like, again, split test, you're measuring, you're tracking. But again, I don't want to get into that because that's all stuff my chair's falling apart. That's all stuff that we've talked about, you know, in past episodes. But at the core of it, again, we want to make sure, again, that people know what you're having an event. You've got the platforms, you've got all the tech sides set up to capture and gather all the information, because we talked about numerous times how important that stuff is. And then really, again, just making sure that people know you've got an event, you're capturing their attention, you're constantly rescheduling. You're constantly getting it on people's schedules. You're sending out email reminders, social, the whole shebang. That's really, again, just like any other event that you would, you know, you'd try and hype up the events and the speakers and the content to really make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck, because putting on a virtual event is so stressful, so amazing stressful. And when we get into that actual presentation side, I mean, there's one thing about showing up into a physical space, because, you know, you've got to set up the booth or you have all this other stuff, but like once you're there, I mean, you pretty much just default, you know, to yourself and the human interactions, and things typically play out fairly decently. Online, there's a whole slew of things that can go wrong. We've got internet connectivity. We've got, you know, how many times have you logged into a meeting and can you see me? Can you hear me? You know, you get all those questions, and you want to avoid that unprofessional look, because again, this is an extension of your brand. This is an extension of your company, your services. And if people come online and see your presentation is, you know, subconsciously that may weigh into their overall view of you. I mean, what's your thoughts on that, Doug?
Well, that's a big thing. I mean, I think people have become very impatient when it comes to, oh, the bad internet, or this Zoom's not working, or I can't log in. They're just like, you know what, I'm out. I'm going to go back to just my average work day.
Yep.
So making sure that you treat it as a proper production. Like if you're the host and you have a number of people coming, there's a few things that we did differently because we were panicked. Like we don't know what's going to happen with bandwidth, and we wanted to make sure that regardless of the bandwidth standing up or Zoom crashing or Facebook, you know, failing, we had built in multiple contingencies. So all of our speakers had pre-recorded their sessions. Mm-hmm. And then we had them uploaded and streaming into a live when we did it. So that way, if it did crash, we still had the asset. They would still have the benefit from it. And we found there's a lot of times, like even if you have that presenter coming live, you just risk a lot of opportunity that's going to crash. So pre-recording the sessions we found really helpful. Mm-hmm. But then having that keynote or that person available to man the chat and answer Q&A was a really good way to increase engagement and make sure the person showed up. And we just told.
Yeah. The presentation of it. I mean, I want to get to interactive segment. I want to step one step before that, but just again, the production of it. Again, you don't have to have super expensive gear like we have here in the setup, but just simple things of making sure you're in a space that you have good lighting, that you have a nice background, kind of behind me here again, you just have something where it's not the kitchen, the dining room. I know, again, this whole work from home thing, like it's tough, but if you're really going to put the time and the effort into hosting an event, you want to create the space around you that is at least kind of clutter free. It's kind of professional, and it kind of sets a stage, because when you host an event, you are, even though you have guest speakers on, essentially you are the star. So you need to dress the part. You need to have a clear background. Try and use a better camera than the stock camera that's on your laptop. There are a lot of ways that you can hook up an iPhone, an iPad, or even if you have a digital camera, to be a webcam now. These are very simple fixes that you can do to just up your production value, just the slightest bit. And then I will, again, at the end of the day, like sound. Like, yes, people want to see you, but people are going to listen to what you say more than they do watching what you say. So having a microphone like this, it doesn't have to be, again, as big and robust, as expensive as this, but just speaking into a microphone of some sort, that you're eliminating a lot of excess ambient noise, where, again, you're delivering some clear production value to your audience so that they don't tune you out, because every day people are stuck with horrible Zoom quality calls and all the distractions. And again, they'll very quickly tune you out. And that's the last thing you want to happen, again, when you're hosting a virtual event. Now, going back to what Doug had mentioned, they were pre-recorded a lot of the assets from these speakers beforehand, which is awesome, because again, you're not going to lose that valuable content, which people are tuning in for. But they kicked it up a notch, and they had the speakers attending the live stream, so that way they can interact with all the questions and comments that were coming in, which to your audience, again, increases the participation value, increases their ROI for them basically devoting their time tuning into what you have. So Doug, what was when you had the speakers coming on and moderating, what was like the biggest challenge with juggling the traffic, the recordings, the live feeds? Because I think to a lot of people that haven't done this, if this is the first time doing it, that sounds like a boatload of work, that if this isn't your part of your normal gig, it's a lot to figure out, right? What was your biggest challenge when managing a live production, live event?
I will be honest, I'll be fortunate. My business partner, Dominic Cummins, covered the majority of that. He had pre-built all the videos. We had intros and outros to them, and we added some buffer time. One thing we did realize on day one, there was a cap for streaming of 8 hours. So we had to cut off and restart a feed. But it really just comes down to planning, having clear communication, as you mentioned early on. Like, hey, this is the agenda. When you're sending out the communication to your speakers, this is when we need you. We need you logged in 10 minutes in advance of your window. That way, if there's issues, we can troubleshoot. And then if you can, stay on just in case things run over, or if people have questions when the presentation ends. Yeah. So it's normally like they would. But if you think about that, that's no different than what you would ask of them at a real event. Mm-hmm. Hey, we need you to be early. We got to get you mic'd up. We're going to do a sound check. And then we're going to send you on stage. Yep. And if you can, stick around after so people can come ask questions. So we tried to get as close as we could to the virtual experience without limiting it. Now, we chose, because part of our strategy at the time was growing a group, a Facebook group, we wanted to broadcast exclusively into the Facebook group. Now, we did this 2 weeks after the COVID shut down everything. So we were probably really early to the game. There weren't as many tech options at the time. Zoom alone has gone through so many upgrades to make it easier. But we found it a really good, seamless way, one, to get people to register for our email, and two, to get people into the group. Mm-hmm. And three, we knew that Facebook was a pretty stable platform. So even if Zoom's broadcastability shut down, we would have been able to go in. We had the videos preloaded in another channel so that we could just do live watch parties. Yeah. So we just had contingencies in place and had our speakers lined up so that in any event, it was really easy for them to engage with the audience. But a lot of that just comes from sitting down, planning and starting well in advance. But even as you mentioned, like making sure that when we did our live sessions, we did the live intro and closing and some training there, just spending enough money. You don't have to go crazy. I mean, less than $300, you can get a webcam, an okay mic, and a ring light.
Yeah.
And for most people, that's good enough. And if you don't have a good backdrop, you could use a white bed sheet and a couple lamps. Like you don't have to break the bank to create the production quality. But if you're doubling down on this, I mean, like you mentioned, dress the part, be prepared, but just run a couple tests before you do the thing.
Yeah.
Whatever platform you choose that you're on, do it a day in advance. Do it the morning of. Like run through, do some reps and sets, and just get a feeling for, okay, this works. Have a colleague do it. Just make sure that all of the things are working the way they're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing you want is, hey, we're running 10 minutes behind because we had a tech issue. That's not the experience anybody wants.
No, and I can tell you again, I know that again, we've done just like this. We're recording via platform and then streaming it on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. We're able to repurpose that way. But when I've done my webinars, there's any number of webinar services out there. Test and try them all. Maybe I'll do a review of my top 5 webinar platforms to use and kind of pros and cons. We'll dive into like a tech talk for that. But again, make sure you're familiar with the platform. And then again, if you want to think of how do you up the value for your audience, how do you try and maximize your ROI, this is, again, everybody's doing Zoom meetings. Everybody's doing virtual stuff. How and why is your event worthy of somebody spending their time and tuning into your production or your webinar as opposed to somebody else's? And again, I think that's where all these little things maybe start to add up. Maybe if you find platforms, again, that have cool features that make interaction a priority. So I've been hosting a couple events with the Central Florida Business Aviation Association, and the feedback, I've just been blown away. The fact that the number of people that literally took time to write notes into the leaders of Central Florida Business Aviation Association that they've passed along to me, how they've talked about how enjoyable of an experience that was for them. To see that people took notice of all these little details, all these little things that I'm talking about. People have taken notice, and they were like, holy cow, that was the most professional presentation that I've sat through in the last 6 months. The platform was great. The interaction was great. All those little things, again, make a difference to your audience, which in turn, I think, again, makes you look that much better and helps you come closer to accomplishing ultimately your goals of why you're hosting a virtual event. So
Absolutely. I think a lot of people need to get clearer on the goals.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot have just decided, we need to do a virtual event because we can't have ours.
Yeah.
And they don't realign with why we're doing this. Right. And the other thing, when you're planning the event, be cognizant that it's not the same schedule as when someone's left their home and goes to a destination. They're at home. They still probably have kids to drop off. They still have things to do. So you may need to adjust your event agenda to mirror some of what people are doing. You have to be cognizant of time zones.
Yeah.
Like 9 a.m. East Coast start means you just neglected probably half of the West Coast audience.
Yep.
So understanding and just thinking about the event, just sit down, take some time and think about what you have to change to give the right experience. For sure. Like that little bit of extra planning is going to go a long way to the success of your event.
Yeah. And again, I think planning just falls back again into just like everything we do online, our digital flight planner. We map out that entire customer journey. Again, here's the event that's falling somewhere in phase 4 and phase 5 of our flight plan, but there's phases 1 through 4 that you have to all set up. That's why, again, I love our process. I kind of love what we do. And, again, we've done a lot of these now. We've done a lot of events. And that's why I really kind of want to share this. And if you have questions about an event that you're wanting to do, maybe you want to host an upcoming event. Maybe there's things you want to do. If you want to pick our brain and ask us specific questions, put it in the comments below, shoot us a message. Happy to hop on the phone and walk through whatever idea you have brewing in your head. I mean, that's really, again, the whole goal of this is to really help you guys bring these products, bring these services, bring your brand to the forefront, and ultimately change your business. As we now again we're in Q4, we're staring down Q1 2021, and let's get you guys moving. Let's get going. Some people have had varying successes with dealing with COVID, but I think everybody would agree that there's a lot more that can go, and these virtual events, I think, are just going to be more and more and more the norm, or some hybrid of it. So, yeah.
Awesome, Chris. This was a good one.
All right. Well, like I said, if you guys have any questions about virtual events, or if you've got horror stories, would love to hear them. Please share them in the comment section below. Or if you've tuned in and have had a really, really good event that you've attended, tag that too. We'd love to check out what they did and, see who the host was, who the sponsors were. That's something super special. So anyways, appreciate you guys tuning in today. We'll see you next week. Until then, take care, be safe, and be well.
Take care, everybody.